This month, Preserve Chattanooga, the historic preservation nonprofit in this city, sold its portion of the terminal station complex on Market Street. The sale to Northpond Partners also protects both the complex's interior dome and its exterior facade from demolition or, quote, inappropriate architectural changes. Todd Morgan is Executive Director of Preserve Chattanooga. Todd, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Preserve Chattanooga recently sold its portion of the historic terminal station. How did the organization first become involved through ownership, and specifically what part was owned by the organization?
In 2018, when our organization was known as Cornerstones, Choo-Choo Partners LP, which was then led by the partners John Kinsey, Frank Fowler, Ben Probasco, and Fred Skillern, gifted the former passenger lobby space of the Choo-Choo complex to the organization. So at that time, the partners owned the entire Choo-Choo complex, including the Glenn Miller Gardens. The former passenger lobby space had served as the hotel lobby since the 1970s. It's probably best known for its beautiful domed ceiling. Ann Gray was the executive director of Cornerstones at that time, and the purpose, from my understanding, was to have a historic preservation organization lead an effort to restore what is truly the centerpiece of that complex. I do know that Cornerstones was planning a capital campaign before the pandemic hit, and then Ann retired. So when I became the ED in November of 2021, I had a chance to get very acquainted with the terminal and its environs. Plus, we have a small office inside the lobby space.
And as we've said, Cornerstones is now Preserve Chattanooga. The terminal is a significant historic structure for Chattanooga. Tell us a little bit about its history and its significance here.
I think for many, Terminal Station really feels like the very heart of Chattanooga, and that's for a good reason. Since 1909, that building has greeted first-time visitors to the city of Chattanooga and welcomed local folks back home. It was meant to be a beautiful shared space from the very beginning. The building was designed by architect Don Barber, and that's Don with two N's, in the Beaux-Arts style that was very popular at that time. Mr. Barber was a New York-based architect who spent some time studying in Paris, France, and while he was in Paris, he won an award for his design of a train terminal for a medium-sized American city. Well, fast forward a bit, and Barber had established his own firm about 1900 in New York and had won acclaim for his 1905 National Park Bank building in that city. It was the largest commercial bank in the U.S. at the time, and the interior lobby featured exposed steel structures supporting barrel-vaulted ceilings with a beautiful central dome. So that probably sounds a little bit familiar to everyone. The story goes that people would go to the bank just to see its interior because it was considered to be so very beautiful. Sadly, that building was demolished in 1961, but you can still experience what it might have been like inside the National Park Bank here in our own terminal in Chattanooga. And all of that is thanks to Mr. William Finley. Mr. Finley was the president of the Southern Railway System, and he's the one that selected Mr. Barber's winning design from Paris for their new Chattanooga terminal. They were very excited about building a new terminal here, but he had a special request for Mr. Barber, and that was that he wanted the interior architecture of Chattanooga's new terminal to be inspired by the National Park Bank building. So when our terminal opened in 1909, visitors were greeted by a beautiful space with similar exposed steel supporting barrel-vaulted ceilings and a magnificent 82-foot high central dome. The terminal station entrance on Market Street, by the way, featured the largest arched window system in the world at that time. So as you can imagine, it sent a very strong statement that Chattanooga had emerged as an important railroad crossroads. In fact, it was the first train station in the South to open a pathway to the north by connecting with Cincinnati. And eventually, the terminal station was serving some 50 passenger trains per day, plus freight and package service. The last train departed in 1970, and the terminal station was closed for a bit, and then it reopened as a hotel complex in 1973, and a whole new era began. So today, you can go there, and the wings of the terminal station are home to popular restaurants and attractions, and the central dome space is still one of Chattanooga's most popular photo spots. I know because I see people in there all the time, and they love to get their photo taken at the terminal.
What prompted Preserve Chattanooga to sell the former passenger lobby and domed space?
Well, in 2021, the building around us was sold to Northpond Partners. They're a real estate investment trust based in Chicago. Northpond eventually also bought the Glenn Miller Gardens And that company is involved with some other historic properties as well. You might be familiar with the Grove Arcade in Asheville or even the Lotta Arcade in Charlotte. For us as a nonprofit, owning that space was a very big responsibility. Our organization has invested over $230,000 on stabilizing and improving the structure. Work that we've completed includes putting on a new roof, making various repairs, but also doing several preservation studies to help people know how they should treat that property and move forward with repairs. Recently, we received a grant from the state of Tennessee, and we used that to build new front doors that were custom built to replicate the original design. Actually, we're down to just one operable door, so it was wonderful for us to be able to do that for the station. That said, our ownership came with a lot of restrictions because of the ground lease for the hotel lobby and because tenants need access to restrooms and that path of travel. Our organization had no control over programming that space. We also couldn't secure the building to our terms. So regardless of it being a very noble idea, that space really was never intended to be separated from the main structure. Our part had no independent mechanical systems or access to water. It was surrounded by private property held by another entity. Simply put, a space like that works really well as part of a greater building, but really can't function as an independent structure. It's kind of akin to someone giving you ownership rights to their living room, which may very well be the best and most beautiful room in the house, but if they retain ownership of the kitchen, the bathrooms, the bedrooms, the water heater, the heating and cooling, and even the yard that surrounds it, it kind of restricts what you can do with that living room. So because of that, we began discussing options with Northpond, and we were able to reach a deal that made us comfortable handing over ownership.
As part of the sale, Preserve Chattanooga was able to negotiate a preservation easement for the structure. What is a preservation easement, and how does it protect the terminal going forward?
Preservation easements are wonderful tools that organizations like ours use across the country to great success. I don't think we would have exited ownership without ensuring some kind of protection for that building because it's just an iconic building for Chattanooga. Gratefully, we were able to negotiate with Northpond a preservation easement not just for the part that we owned, but also for the north and south wings that we didn't own. Easements like this protect buildings from demolition and inappropriate architectural changes. They require monitoring and review by the easement holder, and they run in perpetuity. So regardless of how many times ownership may change, it continues on with that property. It's a legal document, it's attached to the deed, and it offers historic buildings the highest level of protection because even though the terminal is on the National Register of Historic Places, no true protection comes from that. It's just a designation. And here in Chattanooga, we do have local historic districts and one local historic landmark that require oversight by the Historic Zoning Commission, but easements still provide the ultimate protection for a building. We're fortunate, this is something that we can do for this community. We currently hold 7 easements on important buildings here in Chattanooga, including the Dome Building and the Customs House and the Tivoli Center. And then significantly, our easement on the terminal actually extends to the interior domed passenger lobby space because that is also a very important part of the architectural heritage of our community. And so we negotiated for that easement coverage as well.
What kind of change could the public expect to see in the future?
Well, you shouldn't see any major changes to the front facade of the building with the exception of signage replacement over time because our easement helps control that. I'm sure the interior dome and lobby will see some fresh paint and programming for that space. And there's talk of them working with partners in the community to restore the Choo-Choo sign on the roof of the building that is now over 50 years old. The Glenn Miller Gardens and the old hotel building have seen the most changes recently. The Glenn Miller Gardens now have an event lawn, and the hotel has been rebranded to the Hotel Chalet. They've done a nice job restoring many of the train cars, which are still available to sleep in. And they've also opened a restaurant called Elsie's Daughter there, which is named after Don Barber's wife, Elsie Yandell.
And for people who want to learn more about this and everything happening at Preserve Chattanooga, where can they go online?
PreserveChattanooga.com, and you can link to our social media sites from there to sign up for our newsletter.
All right. Todd, thanks so much.
Thank you, Ray.